Okay, you're live now.
Okay, well, welcome everybody to today's Gloucestershire Economic Growth Joint Committee meeting. It's virtual as usual in these strange times, and I think we've got everybody here. But first of all, we will take any apologies if any have been given in, but I don't think there are any, are there? No. Great. Item number 2 is the minutes from the last meeting, and that was.
Sorry, I was late coming in. Did you get the apologies from Christine Gore?
Noted. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Philippa. Okay, item number 2 is the minutes from the last meeting. This was held on the 16th of September. Does anybody have any particular comments on the minutes? Is there anything we need to catch up on in there?
Patrick, just one comment from me, if I might. Just to advise members that we did talk about when we followed up on the Golden Valley presentation given by Tim Atkins from Cheltenham, that we would bring back a paper looking at opportunities to build on the Golden Valley cyber and digital growth for Gloucestershire, and that Tim would therefore give his presentation to the senior officer group, which would spark off that work at officer level. That presentation has taken place, and very interesting it was too. Officers have gone away now back to their own authorities to look at how they wish to work with the Golden Valley development within their own authorities and look around for options for that. And the aim will be that Tim will coordinate the responses from the various councils and bring a paper back to the next meeting, which we are scheduling for the 20th of January. So that's when that paper will come back, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. Hi, Dinah. How are you? Does anybody else have any further comments on the minutes? I don't think there are any action points that we need to look at, are there, Laura?
No.
No, it's good. Okay, on that basis, then, does anybody have a declaration of interest?
Chair, can I declare an interest on item 10 in relation, as a director of the LEP, in relation to the suggested LEP funding? I think I'll declare an interest on that and won't participate in the vote on that one.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Anybody else got an interest? No. Hi, Colin. Nice to see you. Okay, on that basis, then we'll go to our information reports. This is item number 4, and this is the Gloucestershire Economic Growth Scrutiny Committee update. And I'll ask Kevin to give us an update on the activities of his scrutiny meeting. And this will also include, I believe, a summary of the local meetings that the committee held over the summer. Anyway, Kevin, would you like to present your little report? Kevin, are you there?
Don't know if he's having a few IT issues.
Looks like he's...
Yes.
Hi, Kevin. Yes, we can hear you now, so keep your video off. Hi, Kevin. Hello, Kevin. Should we come back to Kevin's line? Kevin, do you want to dial out and try and rejoin? Are you there, Kev? Okay.
Patrick, should we maybe come back to Kevin later?
Yeah, I think we'll do that. So we'll go on to item number 5 then, which is the Gloucestershire Skills Agenda Update. We'll give the link there again to a website, which I thought was very good, excellent. And I'll now ask Pete Carr to give us an update. Pete.
Thanks, Patrick. Good morning, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay, first of all? Okay, great. So just to follow up on what Patrick's saying, as he's saying in the notes that you've actually had through, there's basically a few points I just wanted to update you on. In the last month or month and a half that I've been back at the LEP, what we've tried to do is actually move forward on a number of the aspects of the skills agenda. What I would say, just to start off though, is that the proposals that I'm talking you through today in terms of the work streams for skills in the county for economic recovery are completely integrated with the presentation that you'll hear from Lisa later about the kind of the wider economic recovery. And one of the points I wanted to come through during the conversation this morning is just to really re-emphasise that what we're really keen to do is make sure that any of the LEP, County Council and other stakeholder sort of plans for skills integrates really closely with your district plans. We need to make it work as an integrated whole, and I just wanted to sort of re-emphasise that. So just to cover off, there's basically 4 things I wanted to try and cover off in the 10 minutes that I've got this morning, and essentially what I wanted to do was actually talk a little bit about the skills portal, which hopefully, as Patrick said, you've seen, but unfortunately we're not able to demo this morning. Apparently the WebEx system won't allow it to be demoed actually on this call, which is disappointing. But I can give you a sense of it. Talk you through the skills work streams. Just make sure you're aware of those, and as I say, that we can actually integrate those as fully as possible into what county council and what district councils are doing in terms of local economic recovery. And then to actually talk a little bit more about the latest news. So this morning we're actually launching our careers hub in the county as well, which will be a big support for a lot of schools and colleges in the county in terms of linking schools and businesses more effectively. So just first of all, the skills portal. Now in your packs you've actually got what was a sort of a mock-up of it. It was the document at that time that we were using just to explain the concept. And first off, I just wanted to thank Patrick and Colin and colleagues at County Council for funding this particular piece of work. So the thinking really was just that the message we were getting was that people, obviously a lot of people are in difficult situations at the moment around either they're in furlough and kind of not sure kind of what's going to happen after the end of that. They've in some cases been made redundant recently. For some people, they're actually in sectors that are being decimated by what's happening with the COVID pandemic, particularly things like hospitality and tourism. And so what they're having to do is actually sort of pivot and move into a completely different sector. And so what we're wanting to do is actually put a number of things into place, either to reinforce existing arrangements to help them, or to actually develop new strands of work to support what they need. And the skills portal was the sort of first part of that, if you like, in terms of actually bringing together in one place a number of different local and national support organisations and projects, so that people have got somewhere that they can go to and then find out the information, pretty much in one place. I'd emphasise this is a live document. We went live with this last week, and as you've seen the links in the pack. What I would really welcome is any sort of feedback on it, because we do want to keep it as a live portal. So we're keen. My colleague Paul Woodhouse is actually working with the providers and the stakeholders who are referred to on the site as it is at the moment, just to make sure that that's kept up to date, that it's linking to the right places, that we're really clear about the offer that's available. And what he's also doing is reaching out to other local partners who've got other support that they can provide. And what we're keen to do is actually work particularly with the districts around with their economic development leads, and who are often the skills leads as well, just to make sure that we've got linkages to other local organisations who can help and support people. So on a call with Doina and Steve Lydon a couple of weeks ago, certainly I know, Doina, you were very clear that there were a number of local community organisations who could provide some really good support, and I know that that's very much the case in most of the districts that we can actually add to what's on the portal. So my ask as far as the portal is concerned is if you could make sure that your economic development colleagues are aware of it. We'll be working directly with them on this, but also if you could just think about it from the point of view of any other support for people facing things like redundancy or who are out of work and seeking work and need some help. Then what I want to be able to do is add in opportunities on there and keep that live. So moving on from that, I just wanted to talk through the main work streams that we're heading up in terms of the work around economic recovery in the county. And again, just to emphasise, this is not an LEP piece of work, this is not a county council piece of work, this is not a district piece of work, this is an integrated whole that actually works with kind of all the moving parts, if you like, of the local skills system. And essentially, Andrew, if it's okay, would you mind just sort of sharing the second slide of the presentation for me, just to sort of structure the conversation. So thank you. If we could just move on to that second slide. Thank you. So the pack that you've received includes this presentation. And what I'm not going to do is actually go through all of it, but I did just want to highlight the direction of travel so that it's really clear how we can make that integration work. So essentially what we've tried to do is focus on what we can do in the county, what is doable, what actually adds value, because as you know, a lot of because we haven't got a devolution deal in the county, we're not able to actually get direct receipt of things like the adult education budget in the county. That still comes through to the colleges and to GCC Adult Ed. But what we can do is actually work at integrating that funding and actually making sure that those providers are really gearing up that money and spending that money on supporting people locally to get them back into work. So hopefully you'll see through the slides in a moment that what I've tried to do is actually boil it down to some key priorities that we can work on, that we can actually make an impact on locally. And this has actually been supported by the Gloucestershire Skills Advisory Panel, and also I've consulted with quite a few of the training providers, as well as DWP and the Education Skills Funding Agency. So it's got all of their buy-in, and really what I'm after today is just to kind of make sure that we've got your buy-in to this as well, and that we're able to then work through with you with your skills leads to make sure that it delivers for your residents and your businesses in your patches. So the four main elements of it are information and signposting. That's very much around pulling information together for people, making sure we've got good labour market information, and actually making sure that we're supplying people who are looking at retraining with the information that they need to know where are the growth sectors. who's actually recruiting in terms of businesses, and what are the skills that they actually need. Apprenticeships, we're really keen that we don't lose the momentum that my colleague Dan Boone, in particular at GCC, has actually developed some really good work around levy transfer, and we're really keen to maximise the resources that we've got in county around apprenticeships. And also that we actually have apprenticeships that support the longer term aims of the county. So particularly around cyber and digital, which I'll come on to later, but particularly also around green renewables, low carbon, which obviously is kind of quite timely given the government announcements today on that. Unemployment redundancy support, a lot of that is very much just strengthening what's there at the moment and making sure that's working. And I think for me, a key ask of the economic development leads in the districts is really around helping us to identify businesses that are going under the radar as far as redundancy or kind of folding up as businesses go. We obviously get awareness of the larger businesses that are making redundancies when they're over a certain size through HMRC and the HR1 data. But what we don't have is that visibility around some of the SMEs and when they're struggling and either going under as a business or actually making redundancies. So what we want to be able to do is get in early to actually provide that redundancy support and help people on that. I think obviously from an unemployment point of view, we also just want to make sure that the people who are currently furthest from the labour market aren't continually pushed to the back of the queue. So there's still some work with the GEM project and others that is really important about that social inclusion. And then finally around sort of digital and cyber skills, making sure that we've actually got the skills in the county. I mean, it's been a really interesting, just purely through lockdown, around that massive shift to digital generally for so many organisations. This meeting being an example, but we've still got a lot of our residents who are not digitally savvy, and we need that sort of quite basic digital skills work to be done, as well as the high-end work around the cyber skills. Could we just move on to the next slide, please, Andrea? Thanks. So I won't be going through each of these, you'll be very pleased to know, but I just wanted to sort of flag up really with you that the way I've actually outlined the different elements of this is really to talk about the need, the deliverables, explain a little bit more about it, and then in terms of resources, I felt it was really important that this committee is aware of the situation with the resources relating to these, because I think this is where I would welcome your help. So the annotations, if you like, in the resources panel is if it's a tick, that's resources that are in place at the moment and they're solid, and we're confident about that. If there's a cross, that's something that's missing, and we haven't got the resource for that at the moment. And if it's a question mark, it's something that we're investigating further, and it's something that we'll come back to. So what I'd really welcome is just getting again any sort of feedback from you around the option to come back to you as a committee if, when we're working through these work streams, we find that there are resource gaps that actually significantly undermine our ability to respond to the current economic recovery from a skills perspective. And an example of that for me would be around, with the Growth Hub, we've actually got resource for a colleague to actually work on supporting businesses in redundancy situations, but that funding runs out in March of next year, and obviously that's only now sort of actually 4 months away. So to my mind, it may be that we're going to need to look at some possible local resource going in to continue what's what we've already got in place, rather than parachuting in some new provision or starting from scratch. So it's that sort of thing that I'd be looking at. And similarly, from a county council perspective, having the money to actually set up the portal and actually get that rolling, again, that's hugely useful, and I think that's going to be an important resource. I'm very happy to talk through any more of these separately with you, kind of outside of this meeting, and obviously bring it to life. I'm particularly going to be working with the economic development leads in your districts, but if you need me to talk it through with anybody else, either with members or with officers in the districts, please do let me know. So, as I say, my ask on that is if you could review it, feedback on it, promote the conversation, and as I say, if you could view this really in parallel with the presentation that Lisa's giving later, which does clearly identify some of the skills priorities and employment priorities for Gloucestershire County Council as well, because we are doing our best to integrate that as fully as possible. Okay, and then finally, I just wanted to emphasise that, as I say, with the work to integrate, what we're keen to do, as an example, is through the Growth Hub partners, we're meeting in December. We're actually going to be talking with the district leads on this around redundancy support. We've got a few calls with them set up in the meantime, just to actually move that on. But basically, if you're spotting other opportunities to support people locally, please do feed them in through your skills leads. And then finally, I just wanted to say, just in other news, the report that I know Mike is giving later also talks about the skills investments. So skills capital investments have carried on, and particularly we've got the construction centre at KW Bell in the Forest, and the digital skills centre that Cirencester College are developing as well. So that I haven't gone into any detail on those, because I think the priority is around dealing with the current economic shock situation. But the other thing that's launching today is actually the Careers Hub, which is again being led by the LEP team. But what we're actually doing is working with the Careers and Enterprise Company and 43 schools and colleges in the county, really to work with them on supporting careers education and helping them, particularly in this tough time where it's much harder to engage with some local businesses. So we'll be working on things like virtual work experience and ways of connecting with businesses, even though physically students aren't able to get into employers as much as they could and should do. Okay, I'm going to leave it there just to pause for any questions, any points anyone wants to raise. I hope that's just been a useful but quick canter through. Thanks, Patrick.
Yeah, thank you, Pete. And I think one thing we can all agree on is that as we get further into this pandemic, this sort of work and us working as right across the county together on this is going to be ever more important. Does anybody have any initial comments or feedback or questions for Pete at this stage? John, I can see your hand up. Do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Pete, that's really great progress you've been showing us today. I had a look around the portal yesterday, and the Careers Hub sounds tremendous. So thank you for that, very much for that. Could you give us an update on where the Skills Advisory Board has got to recently, and I suppose more broadly where we are with the development of a skills strategy? Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, John. I firstly, appreciate the feedback on that, and it's good to have some momentum going. The Skills Advisory Board met after a bit of a hiatus. They met last week, and again, the focus was very much on the economic recovery priorities, which I've shared with you. So the focus at the moment is very much on that, as opposed to a sort of a longer term skills strategy. But that's absolutely what I now need to return to, having kind of come back to the fold, really. So obviously they will be connected in that. You'll see in part of the proposals that I've put forward, a number of those sort of link to the longer term ambitions of the county, and I think it's really important that we don't miss the feedback in the research that was done at the start of the pandemic with businesses around and other stakeholders around the priorities for the county are still very much the same. The local industrial strategy still holds good, if you like. So I think it's really important that the skills priorities sort of line up against those. But yes, absolutely. Unfortunately, this has kind of taken priority over getting the skills strategy in place. So my apologies for that. What we will need to do is obviously have that in place and published for from a DFE perspective, if nothing else, for March next year. So I'm basically going to be working on that alongside of this local economic recovery work. I'm very happy to kind of work with you and Ian and others on that from a Gloucester City perspective. But that's broadly where we are. So I think that the focus has been more on the sort of support arrangements for the local economy and the kind of economic shock, and then return to the skills strategy.
Thank you. Just if I could come back to
Thank you, Pete.
Sorry.
Yep.
Does that mean that we should be considering that report you just spoke of, Pete, coming back onto our forward plan for around March next year?
That would be great. Yes, please.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pete. I've got Philippa's hand up now. I'm having a few connection issues here and I'm losing sight of you on my screen. So if you could either use the electronic hand raising thing, or actually just shout if you are trying to get a question or a comment in. So I've got Philippa first, then Steve Jordan. So Philippa.
Thank you. It would be really useful to connecting with Pete in terms of some of the work we're doing as a collaboration across some of the districts in terms of the visitor economy and hospitality. And we can share with you that they've held about 26 sector group meetings with the different sectors of the economy. We've been talking about, where are those transferable skills for those that do become redundant, but also we're gathering intelligence of where you're likely to get bulges, so we can provide that feedback loop of early intelligence of the real pressures we're having. But the other thing we're obviously doing is trying to front load it by doing work on prevention. So linked in with the digital bit, we're providing training and support on enabling businesses to be better digitally enabled. And there's a project going on in terms of enabling businesses, even if they don't have websites, to link in with the new Visit Britain platform. So I can share all of that with you because it's not just the Cotswolds tourism DMO area that's covering, it's reaching out further afield, so we can share that learning as well. But it'd be really helpful maybe if you came along to one of those group meetings, because we can do that two-way sharing.
That's brilliant, Philippa. Thanks very much for that. That's very happy to do that, and I'm sure that there's fantastic work that's going on there that we could really learn from and potentially use in other sectors. So yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you, Philippa. Steve.
Thanks, Chair. I also very much welcome Pete's support. It's very useful. And also in terms of the way it's put across, I think it's very helpful in terms of what's happening, what basically isn't happening, I guess. And I'll come back to that in a second. But I think particularly that the skills portal will be really good. So that's a great addition. And also the work on cyber, obviously, we're particularly keen on from the Cheltenham perspective, but I know that it will benefit everybody. One of the things that I'm conscious of is that something that I think we raised in the original Devo bid about the apprentice clearinghouse, on the basis that we got UCAS locally. Surely we can do something similar for apprenticeships, so I think was the logic. And obviously we never found the funding or the ability to do that yet. I was interested in the perception, and maybe this is a conversation we can take elsewhere if it's going to get too complicated, but perception on how important that is and how much it would actually cost. Because I'm also aware that, as districts, we've just been allocated some discretionary business support funding. Now, in our case, we had a special cabinet yesterday. We allocated the first million of that in direct business grants to businesses that wouldn't have got benefits from the national scheme, and it may be that's in all our cases, the best thing to do is just carrying on giving out those business grants. But equally, there may be some advantage in pooling resource to do some of these business support tools that won't happen otherwise. And that's probably a conversation we could usefully have either individually or collectively, because that may be something, because it may be fairly modest amounts that pulled together we can actually do something useful. So I think that may be a useful conversation. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve. Firstly, thanks for your support on that and raising the question. I mean, I certainly think there is probably some kind of pooled resource that we can do. The challenge I've got at the moment is not being able to say, exactly what would be needed and the resource that's needed. Hence my kind of comment earlier. But I think, it's an interesting point around UCAS, and actually it's very pertinent because part of the reason that I was getting hopeful about the idea of the apprenticeship clearinghouse sort of resurfacing was that we were having discussions with UCAS around them moving into that space, and actually them offering a kind of an apprenticeship clearinghouse as part of the sort of UCAS clearing type support that they're giving now. I need to sort of re-enter that discussion and find out where they've got to on that, because if they're going to do that, then obviously it doesn't make sense to reinvent that. But if they're not going to go into that, then absolutely it would be really helpful to revisit it. And certainly some local neighbours, I think Worcestershire has got, for example, an apprenticeship hub that's linked into its growth hub, and that there are other models like that elsewhere that we could look at what resource is needed and sort of try and model it for what could happen locally.
Thanks, Steve. Dinah, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, Pete mentioned we had a really positive meeting, but not that long ago, was it? And we've now got a new officer who's really keen to work on that for our part. So that's really good. And I did mention around sort of trying to reflect back on the ground, sort of what's going on locally around the community networks. And I think you've referenced some of that on the. It's really good to see that where it's up and running. I've mentioned it in my leaders column this week, so we'll plug it as much as we can. And I think we'll look to how we integrate it more with some of our stuff. So that's brilliant. Just a couple of points. One is, will you sort of monitor usage of the website to get a feel for how it's going, and maybe come back to us and give us an update on, are you getting good response from that? Because it's always the worry when you launch something new that it doesn't get as much reach as you want. The other point I'd make around just to ensure that you've captured all the activity. I may have mentioned this to you when we met, but obviously there's a thing on there around people being made redundant. Now I know that, for example, we've got local union officials going into lots of workplaces at the moment to support people. So I think that's an activity that's currently going on. And so whether we're reflecting on the portal, that is another resource available for people within their workplace. Trade unions will be there to support people in that, whether it's to upskill or to get support with redundancy. And I know there's also a wealth of resources, even for people who aren't members of trade unions, to access a whole range of different support. So I wonder if that should be reflected on as well, because I know that's something that's going on at the moment. And we know that, unfortunately, the redundancies are going up currently. But anyway, I'm very happy to see that is up and running, and hopefully we can develop it and push it further. And I'll mention it to the local community groups I'm aware of, just to ensure that they're aware of it. And if there's anything they can feed back to you as well, to ensure we've captured everything that's going on currently. So ideally it would all be in one place. So thanks for that.
Thanks, Donna, and absolutely. As I say, it is very much a sort of a live portal. So what we are keen to do is be responsive and add in the other elements there. So I think you're absolutely right, and you did mention it a couple of weeks ago around the sort of union support there. And I think there's definitely more that we can signpost to there. I know it's also sort of challenging times on that, with Union Learn funding being cut, and so we will be lobbying for that not to be cut as well. But yes, certainly happy to do that. And in terms of the monitoring, yes, absolutely, because this is sort of based on conversations, initial sort of feel for what people will want, but there might be parts of the site that are just not used that we can drop, or there might be parts that are really heavily used, and or we're getting feedback saying, just as an example, excuse me, I had a very good conversation yesterday with the Money and Pensions Advice Service, and we know that sort of obviously people going through things like redundancy or job change will need sort of financial advice as well. So and that's so we're working on plans to integrate that as part of the offer there, and make that more widely available.
Terrific. Thank you, Doina. Thank you, Pete. I can't see anybody on the video at the moment, and I don't see any hands up. If there is anybody who wants to add another comment, please say your name. Silence is golden. I think that might be it then, Pete. Thank you very much for your report. It is a terrific report. As I said, it's going to be vital going forward, and there are and asks of us all to make sure that this is a living report and we move with the relevant times. So anyway, thank you once again, Pete. Okay, if everybody's happy, we'll move on to the next. Oh, actually, we'll move back to the previous agenda item. I did see Kevin. I can see he's there. Kevin, do you want to give us your report on the scrutiny committee?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can you hear me first of all? Yeah.
That sounds great.
I see nodding heads. I've changed my device, so now I can sort it out. And I do apologise for the misdemeanor that happened before. Nothing down to me though. It's all modern technology, Right. In your packs, you'll have the local meeting summary and the outcome reports from us. And obviously members will note that one of the outcomes from the local meetings roadshow was to incorporate a standing item in the committee's agenda going forward to allow district feedback and to continue that dialogue. I'm very keen, and I think the committee are very keen, that the members on our committee feedback to their districts and their districts feedback to the committee. So I would like to still see, because we all keep talking about working together, I need to see that dialogue continue, and we would like that, hence the reason it's on the agenda. Mike mentioned it earlier, but the committee did receive the Golden Valley presentation at the last meeting, and members were very impressed by the project and were very keen to be kept updated on its progress, because obviously this is something that's going to move on, I would imagine, quite quickly, and actually, it is very good for this area, and we really would like to see the progress on this. This afternoon, we're receiving a presentation from Modern Methods of Housing, which the committee have been very keen to look into, as well as setting our agenda item for the remaining 2 meetings of the committee's term and receiving an economic update from the LEP. Going back to the modern methods, obviously one of these modern methods is modular housing. And one of the things that the committee have noted is obviously the lack of building trades on sites being available at the moment. Modular housing actually helps with that. But what we would potentially like to see is potentially a factory set up within Gloucestershire, because that would then help employment going forward, and hopefully help economic growth in that way. So we've got a presentation this afternoon. I believe it's from Mike Craggs, and we will report back on that, on what we find. And obviously I know Mike is very interested in this himself, and I know we've all done factory visits to modular factories, and some of us are very interested in this. So it's something that the committee is keen on, and hopefully we can move forward. That's basically my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Does anybody have any comments or questions for Kevin? Again, I can't see any videos, and I don't see any hands up. So if anybody wants to speak, can't put a hand up, please shout. Nope. Well,
As the song goes, Chair, and as you said, silence is golden.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Kevin. Well, thank you for your report, Kevin. I look forward to meeting this afternoon. We'll now move on to item number 6, which is again another very exciting scheme. This is the King's Quarter Regeneration Update. And I think Richard is actually going to give us the introduction to this report. Richard, are you online?
Yes, thank you, Patrick. I hope you can all hear me. The King's Quarter Regeneration Update is a really, really exciting project in Gloucester. I'm just going to spend a moment just introducing the team. Ian Edwards is our head of place, and he will be supported in this presentation by Esther Croft and Stuart Deering of our development partners, Reef. So I'll just pass over straight away to Ian. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. I'll just share my screen. So, Chair, if you can tell me whether you can see that or not.
Yes, that's terrific. We can see that.
Marvellous. Thank you very much. I think the first thing I would like to say is just a clarification on the words used here. Actually, King's Quarter Forum may be a little bit confusing. The Forum is now the development title for what we use to refer to King's Quarter. So where you see Forum, that is King's Quarter, just hopefully to address that potential confusion. The presentation this morning will run through a few topics, and as Richard said, we will be helped by partners from Reef, or joint venture partners. I'll be talking through the location and strategic context. Sam Potter, who's the Reef creative director, will present on the design and sustainability. Esther Croft, who is the development director, will present on the Forge. I'll pick up the programme. And finally, Stuart Deering, who's the chief executive of Reef, will present a summary for the committee. We'll take questions at the end if that's okay, and Adam Paul from Reef will also be joining us in those presentations. Just to move on to the site and the location, that unprepossessing site you see in front of you there, a lot of you will recognise is the former site of Bruton Way car park, as well as the bus station, as well as the Old Benwick House, which is the tax office in Gloucester. To get your bearings, there's the new bus station to the bottom left, and a rather fine Norman building to the top right there, just puncturing the skyline. So when we talk about the Forum, this is the area of Gloucester we are referring to. And I think that picture was very different before lockdown. I have to say lockdown's had no impact at all on the progress of this scheme, and the demolition of the car park and the offices continued unabated during that time. Just to pick up strategic context for the Forum itself, and a lot of this is consistent with the context you received a presentation on previously with the Golden Valley. The cyber digital security context is the same throughout the county. Clearly, the opportunities that exist are the same. But I just wanted to pick out a couple of ones specific to this scheme, if that's okay. We have a very strong alignment with the local industrial strategy, both through employment, skills, and the cyber-rich technologies that will be occupying the Forum. I think that's been repeated within the recovery document that the LEP published recently, when the Forum was identified as one of their key recovery initiatives. We have strong links, or rather we're developing links to the Cyber Tech Business Group. And colleagues from Reef and Digital Reef on Monday will be presenting to that group to provide a more technical update on the type of businesses and developments they're thinking of to occupy the Forum. It is our #1 priority in the City Council's economic development strategy. And there is a very strong alignment, as you would hope and expect, with our own digital strategy. And clearly, Gloucestershire is leading the way in its engagement with Western Gateway, and our contribution through the Forum and digital technologies will be a strong part of that engagement. Just picking up briefly on the economic impact of the Forum, our view is that we're creating in excess of 1,000 new jobs, a good number of them in high value added sectors. This touches on the presentation Pete gave earlier. And I think we have to have the ambition of ensuring that the Gloucester residents, the Gloucestershire residents, have the skills required to access those employment opportunities when this comes online in 22-23. And I think it'd be marvellous if we could develop something along the lines of a forum academy to support that ambition. And that's certainly something we'll be taking up with Pete outside of this discussion. We see upwards of additional £40 million worth of additional GVA through the employment and the economic benefit of the forum. And here's a figure you may recognise from the Golden Valley presentation, which identified a growth of 34% within the sector as a result of Golden Valley. We're saying, let's see if we can get that to 50%. It's an ambition. We're not going to commit to it, but I think if we don't have the ambition, then we probably shouldn't be in the game that we're all in. So we're looking to raise the sector's profile by a further 50% within Gloucestershire. A little bit of context. This is taken from the same angle that the original shot I gave you was, but as you'll see, this is the development as envisaged and as described within current planning applications. And I'll do a very quick run around. I'm sure colleagues would like to say more when they get their opportunity. It will have leisure uses, restaurant, bars. There will be a small element of retail, but it will only be a small element. We know the challenge that retail faces and will continue facing the city. And the forum development is very much contributing to the repurposing of our city centre, bringing more residential, bringing more leisure, bringing more opportunities for people to spend more of their time in our city. There'll be a conference facility, again, much needed within Gloucester. Probably the first 4-star hotel within the city. We have plans for others, but this one is going to be coming on stream very early. A replacement for the car park. We can't assume that we can do this without provision of car parking, and I'd like to perhaps talk about that a little bit later. 125,000 square feet of new office space, grade A office space. Gloucester has no grade A space. So this is really meeting a demand, an evidence demand in the city. As well as a gym, which is obviously a members club associated with a lot of the offices and the accommodation. At the very top there, and we'll pick up on that a little bit later, is the Forge. Now this is a bespoke 26,000 square feet operation within the forum, and Esther and others will give you a little bit more detail on that as we move through the presentation. Now, Chair, at this point, if we're all in the same room, we'd be running through a rather superb fly-through of the design, but I didn't trust my broadband, to be perfectly honest, to do that here. So I'll invite Sam Potter, Design Director at Reef, to start presenting on the design aspects. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. This is a great opportunity, thank you, to show you what you're looking at here. Hopefully you've got a feel from the aerial view you just saw. Is the new gateway to the city, as we see it. From the bus station, the train station, and obviously the new car park, which has some innovative aspects in its own right. So very much the arrival to the city. And you see in the middle of the image framed the view to the cathedral tower. And very much the initiative here is to frame the wonderful history of Gloucester and its sort of powerful history, and look to the next chapter with this digital campus. And as part of that, arriving from the station of the bus station, you come to this point here, a new public space with a completely pedestrianised public walkway between two office buildings on right and left, and framing the cathedral tower is a link bridge, which is both a metaphor and also a physical entity, suggesting the synergies between all the different uses and how we see people resting, working, shopping, relaxing and enjoying the city within the sort of future way that we engage with cities, a very prominent topic at the moment. And on the right-hand side is actually a digital screen, which will be used both to celebrate the city's culture, but also the campus itself. Ian, if you could go to the next slide, that'd be great. Within that, there's also housing. On the right-hand side here, you see a series of apartments, 43 apartments, which take up a very historic street on Market Parade into Gloucester that's been there since Roman times, and currently surface car parking, and restating that streetscape, which leads you onto the King's Square. And on the left-hand side, you see the office block and the hotel. So creating a completely new street with abundant public realm. The highways will be detuned to be just bus and taxi traffic. And again, really encouraging that pedestrian arrival and movement through into the city in a space which will be activated by a multitude of different uses. Next slide, please, Ian. Here, you're looking back towards that space, and you're actually standing in what will be the new King's Square, currently on site, with its array of fountains, its event space, and we see the King's Square and the lanes beyond into the city, as well as the Forum, as being all part of this big regenerative identity at the entrance to the city. And on the right-hand side, you see the hotel in the brickwork, and beyond the office scheme, so relatively substantial buildings. And on the rooftop, other uses which will be accessible to users of the buildings, so that we have a nice mix and integrated active area. Next slide, please, Ian. This is just to give you a feel for the quality of the interior of one of the office spaces, with a view back out towards the Cathedral Tower and obviously the countryside beyond, marrying up what we perceive to be what the future work environment will aspire to achieve. A highly sustainable building, which I'll come on to in a minute, which is why you see sort of exposed finishes. There's all sorts of clever things about how we minimise energy and use contained within the spaces. Next slide, please. And one more interior view, which is actually behind that digital screen that I mentioned early on. And the idea really, it's looking at the future of work and how that will be a lot about coming together, social spaces, perhaps a little bit less at your desk, but much more about engaging. And the buildings, and I don't have time to go into the detail here, but they are designed so they can be broken up into or used in smaller components, so that we can appeal to the full spectrum of employment, from single employees to SMEs to departments, corporates, etc. And look at how all of those different organisations will work together and feed off one another within this development. Next slide, please, Ian. And then again, just reinforcing that bridge connection between the office, the hotel, the conference space, and the car park. You'll even be able to park on the top floor of the car park and move into the office space or stay at the hotel, thus trying to maximise the beneficial commercial use of the car park, so that the uppers and the lower floors are activated and thoroughly used throughout the development and within the city. Next slide, please, Ian. And I touched on sustainability. We are looking at what's a BREEAM excellent office, and there's elements of outstanding for those of you who know BREEAM that we're targeting, but crucially looking to the future, and the timing of the announcements this morning were appropriate, that we were looking to a net zero carbon in operation development. It's entirely electric. The office buildings will be naturally ventilated or capable of being so, with openable windows. I hope it sounds simple, but in this world, having offices with openable windows is tricky, but becoming very important given concerns over quality of air and people's interactions. And also the car park will be clad in what we believe to be the largest green wall in the southwest. And that's partly obviously to provide a great streetscape and appearance, but it's also to do with air quality and looking at how this development can be innovative in its use of greenery, landscape, and what a new campus in a city centre should be all about. And obviously for a digital campus, there's a lot of smart technologies that have been integrated into development, so those can basically provide an infrastructure which is flexible over the next decades to come, with all the interesting technologies that we're aware of, and even those that we're not sure about yet. And I think that's where I'd need to pass over to Esther to continue.
Thanks, Sam. So this is the Forge concept. We're really excited about bringing forward one of our flagship Forge concepts at the Forum. Reef Group have joined forces with Tinton Group, who are leaders in the digital sector, to launch the creation of a series of forges all across the UK. And we're really pleased to be able to say that Gloucester's going to be one of the first places in the UK to open one of the forges, which in essence will be at 26,000 square feet of highly tech-enabled and flexible workspace, as Ian previously mentioned. Ian, can you pass it over to the next slide, please? Okay, so we intend to create a very accessible and physical community for both startups and SMEs in the digital sector. The key point for each forge is that they are being created from the ground up. I think this is something we're very passionate about. And by this, I mean that we will review the local economic drivers and hopefully through that identify the facilities and the services which we will then provide within the forge to match that is needed on the ground. I think it's very important to note, given the audience and obviously Golden Valley and the exciting progression that that's making, that we see the forge as a very important complementary and additional offer to the existing efforts that both the LEP and Cheltenham Borough Council are making to further the county as a leader in the cyber and the digital worlds. And we really want to for the forge to become an important tool and part of that process. Can you pass it on to slide 3, please, Ian? So the forge will be located at the entrance to the forum, and that's the view that Sam previously showed you. It's going to be immediately on your left-hand side, so just behind the new bus station and the new transport hub. And subject to sort of further collaboration with the City Council, we will be looking to provide facilities such as digital labs, podcast and creative studios, and also education and learning spaces alongside the more normal sort of shared workspace and digital sort of hub opportunities such as edge computing facilities and access to secure data clouds, etc. We're very lucky that in the Gloucester Council have already supported the creation of a creative innovation hub, which is actually located within King's House on the other side of Market Parade. And we see great opportunities for the forge to work really closely with the team in King's House and look at ways in which potentially the forge can also help to create support opportunities for creatives and increase the amount of entrepreneurship in that sector for the city. What we believe will make the forge different in terms of the flexible workspace on offer across the county is our intention to make sure that it's designed in a way that it enables use by not only business groups and the business community, but also the third sector and local community groups. And we really want to try and find a way in which potentially the space can be shared not only on a normal working day pattern, but also across and into the evenings to create as many opportunities for cross-fertilisation as possible between those three important sort of parts of the economy. Thanks, that's my bit.
Thanks, Esther. Back to me just for a short overview on the programme, and I think you'll see from this that the forum is not a distant dream. As Sam identified, we've already started in many ways with the redevelopment of King Square, $5 million investment from the City Council to bring a space the size of Leicester Square up to the class that we would expect within the context of this development. Phase 1 of the forum is expected to be on site in February. That's essentially 17 new apartments and relocation of an existing retail offer, which then allows phase 2 to start later in the summer of 2021. So the programme itself, everything you saw on that overview slide, will be looking at completion by December of 2023. So I think that really sets us the timescale for the development of the skills concept that we touched on earlier, ensure that the good people of Gloucester and Gloucestershire are ready to access the opportunities that this development offers. I was now going to pass on to Stuart Deering, Chief Executive of Reef, just to wind up the presentation.
Hi folks, thank you very much. My name is Stuart. I can't say much more than what's been eloquently presented by Ian, Esther and Sam, but I just want to make the point that Reef are developing a number of town and city centre regeneration projects throughout the country. It has, however, been an absolute pleasure to work with GCC over the past 4 years. They've been uniquely ambitious and share our passion for urban intervention and digital partnerships. We feel that the forum will benefit local society over the short, medium and long term, and it will act as a catalyst to repositioning Gloucester City Centre as a thriving destination. The forum will also play a vital role in LIS digital offer for the county, complementing the Cyber Valley and other LEP-funded digital infrastructure projects. The forum will provide 900 plus construction jobs, therefore stimulating the city centre both from an economic perspective, but also from a morale perspective, which is obviously essential in facilitating society recovery from COVID-19. The forum itself, once complete, as Ian said earlier, will secure up to, well, over 1,000 jobs, hopefully close to 1,200 jobs, and it'll be the higher value jobs and some digital related in bespoke, future-proof, flexible accommodation, which Sam has spoken to you about. As Ian has said, the forum will attract the first new 4-star hotel. We have had discussions with a number of operators, including Marriott and Hilton, both who are very, very interested, as well as a consideration for Reef's own independently branded operation, which is a 4-star outfit also. So the forum in tandem with the Forge will create a campus at Digital Corridor, which will act as a catalyst to build a sustainable digital economy for the city and region. And I will finalise the presentation there. But thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Stuart. I think that's it from us, Chair. So we'll hand it over to you for any questions.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Thanks to Richard, Ian, Esther, Sam and Stuart. A very exciting project and a terrific presentation. Just before I open it up, just a couple of comments. I'm really pleased to see the amount of greenery in the proposals and the amount of trees and the carbon zero target. Just one question. Are you doing anything to try and offset the carbon footprint of the construction phase?
Sam, is that something, or Sam or Stuart, want to take that one on?
Yeah, I'll over to Sam.
Yes, multiple things. I mean, the great thing is it's a brownfield site in its own right. We're able to reuse some of the demolition from the car park within the site. And we have quite an archaeologically sensitive site. The recent discovery of Whitefriars Priory on the site has meant that we actually have to design very innovatively and have very shallow foundations, which again is actually quite a low energy, low demand approach. And crucially, we're seeking to work as much as we can with partners in the local area, suppliers, etc., because so much of energy waste in construction is through transit and distant transport movements. And obviously it's better for Gloucestershire if we can work with contractors and consultants as locally as possible, and that's a key ambition of the project. But as some of you I'm sure will know, the biggest energy use is in operation in any development, and so most of our efforts are focused on ensuring that the buildings minimise any use in energy use, and where otherwise it will be from renewable sources, whether that's from grid suppliers or even some on-site generation.
Terrific, thank you very much. Does anybody else have a question or a comment for the guys and Esther? I can't see any digital hands up and I can't see any video faces. So if anybody does have a comment, would they like to shout?
Can I ask, it's Philippa here, quick question. I think is picking up on a couple of things that Sam said. I'm interested to hear about sort of innovations in the design of the building that's having to respond to the archaeology at the site. And I'd be interested just to touch base with you on that. Working with sites in the Cotswolds, that's a barrier to us in terms of constraints of the amount of archaeology and other things that we've got. So I'd be really interested to know did you get a positive response from the archaeologists in terms of working your way through to a solution, or was it a painful journey that you had to go on?
Not painful at all. We've had a great relate, as Stuart said, we've been working in Gloucestershire for 4 years, and we have a great relationship with the city archaeologist. So we've been able to work hand in hand. And in fact, that's enabled us to do the archaeological excavations over the last 6 months. So in good time to allow the proper research before we commence on site. And that's allowed us to come up with a really good strategy, know what we're dealing with. And we've employed top-notch engineers who, in essence, we have horizons. And the simplest way of looking at it is that we're designing our foundations so they sit above both medieval and Roman finds, so those can all be documented and where necessary left in situ. But as you say, the relationship with the city archaeologist and obviously the council itself has been paramount in making that a very fluid and actually enjoyable process, leading to us being able to celebrate in the design, the historic interpretation. We don't have time here, but there's lots of interesting things in the landscape which will help with the education as you move through the scheme into the city about Whitefriars, the Roman history, and more recent digital history, as it were.
It's a genuine joint effort, Philippa. You know, it has been right from the start, and that goes across the board with all of the city councils, planning officers, and it's one of the reasons why it's made it as efficient as it has done.
Okay, thanks. Mike, you did have your hand up, but it's gone down. Did you want to say anything?
Well, I put it down because I thought I'd mention it on the next item, but I thought that was terrific, Chairman. I just thought, well done to Gloucester City colleagues and their other colleagues that have worked on that. Really interesting presentation, and you know, when you look at everything that's going on in Gloucestershire at the moment, and now what's looking to come out of the centre of the city of Gloucester, I think that was fantastic, and bodes well for the future for the city and the county. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Yeah, I completely second that. I think it's terrific. And I love the way it links up with the cathedral. It's just, you know, it just works so well. Dev, you've got your hand up.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Yes, I absolutely agree. From the LEP's point of view, this is a really exciting project, and the Gloucester City team have kindly kept us abreast of what's been going on. We, in turn, have been keeping the Department of Bays aware of the plans, and we've had positive feedback from them. It'd be lovely to get some funding to put into the pot in due course. Also, the GCHQ team and the National Cyber Security team are aware of this and are supportive. And it was good to hear Esther saying that this needs to be a complementary offer for the county working with the Golden Valley development, and that's something we as the LEP will work hard to make sure that, you know, this is a large complementary offering for the county, particularly for things when it comes to foreign direct investment. We can't have Gloucester saying no, don't go to Cheltenham, and we can't have Cheltenham saying no, don't go to Gloucester. We need to make sure this is a comprehensive offering for the county. Simple as that. So no, well done everybody, and the LEP is here to help as much as we can.
Thank you.
Terrific, thank you, Dev. Does anybody else have any comments? No, can't see any hands up. Can't hear anybody. Certainly can't see anybody. On that basis, then, yeah, I'd like to say well done to all the Gloucester City team. And thank you very much for a terrific presentation. Okay, we will move on then to item number 7, and this is for you, Mike. And this is the Strategic Planning in Gloucestershire paper and an update on strategic and local plans in the county. Mike.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is a paper for noting, so I won't spend too much on it. It's a paper that's been put together by all the planning colleagues from around all the authorities, and the aim really is just to give members of the committee a snapshot statement as to where we are with our planning delivery within the county, because we don't often see, whilst you see your own authorities and study those very closely, you don't often see everybody else's in one spot. So that's what this report is doing. So I'm grateful to colleagues from all the districts who have contributed to this report. Really following on from that wonderful presentation from colleagues of the city, you can see wherever you go in the county at the moment, there is a lot of growth going on and some big sites bringing forward housing and employment for the county, echoing some of the comments I said at the City Region Board yesterday. I think Gloucestershire at the moment is a county that is growing tremendously with some fantastic projects, both housing, employment, infrastructure, and really interesting development project at Golden Valley, and now the Forum coming on along at the same time. The report mentions a couple of things there in terms of the white paper planning for the future. It gives you the algorithm calculations on the new methodology. I won't say too much about those. It looks like the government's going to revisit that, but there's some scary figures on there if the government didn't revisit that algorithm. But let's hope they do. And then just finally, Chair, just to comment about the statement of Common Ground, the strategic planning document commissioned by this committee. We're still working on that at the moment. David O'Kill from Cheltenham has been working with planning colleagues and is bringing forward the first iteration of that document, which is likely at the moment, or is scheduled to come to this to the next meeting in January. But we are looking at to take that forward and work together to look how much of a vision we can set in that statement of common ground. So it's likely that the edition that comes in January is going to be built on in 2021 to see how we can set this vision out in there that we talked about in the City Region Board yesterday. So essentially a paper for noting, Chair, with those comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. So we're asked to note it. Does anybody else have any further comments for Mike or questions? Again, I can't see hands, can't see any faces, can't hear anybody. Terrific. Well, thank you very much, Mike. Well, we move straight on then to item number 8, and this is the Gloucestershire COVID-19 Economic Recovery Plan update. I think Lisa is going to start us off and give us an update on the collaboration across COVID-19 economic recovery planning in Gloucestershire. And then I think we've got Colin after that. So Lisa, are you coming in?
Great, thank you very much, Chair, for that. So the paper gives a very short update on the progress made against the 3 areas of collaboration that were agreed at the last Joint Committee meeting in September. And that work's been followed up through the Senior Officer Group, through various meetings, and all of that is with the core principles of making sure that collaborative and joint activity can be delivered across districts, counties and the LEP. So the 3 areas of focus that we said we would come back and report on include skills, visitor economy and lobbying activity. So the first one around skills, we heard most of the content of that from Pete Carr earlier, but I think worth highlighting again that the new investment that's been secured through the Get Britain Building Fund, which I think Deb's going to pick up a little bit more on later, but the 2 projects around that, one highlighted is the Gloucestershire Applied Digital Skills Centre with Cirencester College, and that's focusing on cyber and digital, so very well connected with the activity of Golden Valley and everything that's been discussed this morning. And the second around Construction Education Centre in Cinderford, so very kind of real in-life practice version of skills development there. And the second area around the skills portal, which Pete also touched on, so really seeing how that national and local offer can be simplified, particularly to the public and residents that might be in need of some additional support or input in terms of their future careers and jobs prospects. In relation to the second area, so really around the visitor economy, and again, this is something that's picked up by the LEP more centrally, so I think Dev will go into a bit more detail on that. But the premise is working across the destination management organisations and the Visit Gloucestershire partnership to develop the strategies for the future of the sector, So considering what that might mean in terms of workforce challenges, sustainable tourism agenda, and taking that forward as part of that overall recovery plan for the county. And then thirdly, really around lobbying. So as debated at the last joint committee meeting, really essential to that, working out which freedoms and flexibilities are core to making an impact that's really relevant for some of those local challenges. So the collaboration around that has considered that high streets and vacant unit management, partly as a long-standing issue, but partly as an issue that the evidence shows is likely to get worse, especially around the food and beverage sector. So as high streets have slightly deteriorated, there have been some really good programmes and investment and ideas from government in terms of the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, which did, I think, quite temporarily help to stimulate demand. But I think through the second lockdown, obviously those industries are going to be even further impacted, which may lead in the longer term to more vacancies and challenges around that. So the work that's being done is really to explore which of those freedoms and flexibilities might be possible, particularly at a district level, but also in conjunction with the LEP and the county, and reported back. So that's something we will continue to follow up, and that's being led on by Tracy at Cheltenham. So those are the three core areas and the real areas of collaboration and joint activity. The Senior Officer Group continues to meet and debate and discuss those issues and deal with anything new that's coming up, particularly in relation to the evidence that is presented on a regular basis. So I think, unless I've missed anything, Mike, I think that's pretty much everything from this update. So just if there's any questions or comments from the committee.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lisa. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Lisa? No electronic hands, no faces, no sounds.
Sorry.
Okay, Colin, over to you, I think.
Oh, sorry, Chair, can I come in?
Oh, yes, who's that?
Yes, I was a bit slow to get my hand. It's so fiddly to raise your hand. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I just wanted to say on the visitor economy, I couldn't see a reference, unless I've missed it, to obviously the canal, and you'll be aware that we've just had a great success in being awarded the Heritage Lottery Fund of nearly £9 million. And I think that we're on quite a tight timescale. That will be delivered quite soon. And I think that is going to make a really positive impact. It will not only be for the district, but obviously, you know, for Gloucester as well and the Gloucester Sharpness Canal. So I think going forwards, we should reflect that in any thinking, because it's going to have it's going to really create an extra attraction for people to come and use the existing facilities and sort of, so that's, I think we're seeing that as quite a game changer, and we're looking strategically how we ensure that all elements are sort of looked at in the round for the canal, because as well as the canal itself, we see that as a real potential for economic growth along the canal. And that's one of the reasons why it's successful, as well as the biodiversity and the other elements of it. So I think as we look at it, I think we should look at it from a county-wide perspective as well, because I think it can have a really positive impact. And we've been talking as well around mapping some of the attractions of the county, not simply on, you know, things like transport and everything, but we've got the canal that runs, we've got two canals that run, you know, through the canal, through the county, but also we've got the Cotswold Way, and how we possibly sort of think more strategically about those absolutely key attractions. And one of the things we've been talking about locally is we certainly noticed over the summer, anecdotally, that the Cotswold Way was really well used. I think probably at this time, with people not being able to go anywhere, it was probably more used. Generally, it's well used, but certainly we noticed a little bit more of that. So I think, again, that's something we really to. It's such a fantastic selling point, and just developing that. And there's always been a little bit of a feeling that we haven't maybe developed the facilities supporting visitors along the route, you know, around accommodation, all the rest of it, and the canal will add something extra to that. So, yeah. So.
Can I just ask, sorry, it's Philippa coming in. Sorry, Patrick, it's just Philippa coming in again. I wholly agree with the points made about a more strategic approach to that. If we've got those examples, and how are we best feeding back to make sure they get captured and taken forward?
Lisa, Mike, do you want to come in?
Well, just a comment on that. Firstly, I think Dorna's comments well made point, and the more it almost feels the more we have conversations jointly, the more great stuff comes out of the out from our list of projects in terms of the good stuff that's happening in this county. So thank you for reminding us of the canal project, Dawn. I think that's really helpful. In terms of bringing them together, the LEP very much are looking at the visit, or leading the work on visitor recovery and the collaboration there. So the points made about mapping the major attractions is something perhaps that Dev could take to his visitor group, which has been working and which will be part of, I'm sure, his LEP update. I don't know whether Dev wants to comment. If not, we pick it up at the senior officer group. But
yeah, just I can jump in there, Mike. Thanks. Essentially, I've touched on it in my update, but the Visit Gloucestershire partnership will be producing a 3-year tourism strategy for the whole county, and they're not producing it in isolation. One of the reasons they got the funding from the county council to do it is because they said they will ensure that there'll be genuine ongoing collaboration to produce that 3-year strategy. So all 6 districts and the 3 DMOs would have engagement over the next 6 months to make sure that when it is the strategy is produced and shared, everybody can feel that they've had their input into it. So absolutely, the canal should be in there, and that will be probably, is it Amy Beckett on your side, Doina, who will be informing that strategy.
Can I just come back quickly, Chair? I think that's immensely positive, and I'll just say don't underestimate the use of the canal as the transport side of things. I see Colin's waiting to come in there as well. You know, we mapped, I think, 250,000 journeys along the existing route of the canal, and it's a really, so I think we need to factor that in as well. So it's increasingly being used. The bit of that the county helped to resurface the cycleway again, fantastically used by people for leisure and work purposes. So ensuring that we've got that joined up thinking, and I welcome the fact there'll be a strategic look at that from the visitor economy as well. But it's about working as well. It's not simply visitors. There's a great, synergy between the two. So thanks for that.
Can I just add to that, because I think the point Diana's made and the others, but the aim is going to be effectively with the new canal, that will have a parallel cycle route with it, and obviously along the towpath. It will actually mean that you could be able to go from Stroud to Sewell Junction. Then Sewell Junction has got the new cycle route that's already been put in at the moment. They'll go northwards right the way up the side of the Sharpness Gloucester Canal to Gloucester. There's a short space that we're already focused on at the moment from GC perspective, but how we get the cycle route from there across to the other side of Gloucester, which we're working on at the moment. And it's not that difficult. It just needs to be worked out how we do it best to do it. And then, of course, at the moment, we've already started work on London Road in Gloucester, which will then go all the way through to Cheltenham, whereby the B4603. So effectively, what that will do is will mean there'll be a continuous cycle route from Stroud right the way through to Cheltenham, and hopefully we get then the Bishop's Cleeve section in out to Bishop's Cleeve as well. So in effect, it will link 4 districts immediately with a really high quality cycle route all the way through, which again is not only as a good for commuting and alternative travel and sustainability, but it's also, as Duane said, a very good focus for visitor economy and things like that as well.
Thank you, Colin, and everybody else for your input. Has anybody else got any comments on this part of the item? No? Okay, well, we move on straight to you then, Colin.
Thanks, Patrick. I'll do the first part, and then I'll probably hand over to Lisa. Depends for any questions and maybe to add anything extra. As you're aware, we at the last Gloucestershire Economic Joint Committee in September, we talked in broad terms about this report and where we got to, and the economic recovery plan for Gloucestershire County Council from our perspective, that is. And mustn't get confused with the GJEC committee, GJEC report, which is slightly different, because that comes from a collaborative approach from how we work together collectively, bringing the plans together. So I just wanted to emphasise that because there's some confusion between the two a little bit at the moment. So the paper supports the development of the Gloucestershire County Council COVID Economic Recovery Plan. It builds on things like the 2050 vision, local industrial strategy, also the locality-based economic plans, and has been produced working with all the districts, the LEP, other partners who have been interviewed, members included as part of that process in developing the plan. The plan really covers sort of 7 sort of areas, which is the overall vision and context and how the plan fits the current landscape, the drivers setting out what Gloucestershire is facing, the narrative around communities, residents and business base and how we move it forward, the 3 drivers of recovery, a detailed action plan against the drivers of recovery and how the impact will be measured. The sort of 3 themes that's based around are people, place and connectivity, skills and employment, and he says, this was I remember the 3rd one, infrastructure, economy and growth. So if we take each of those in turn, turning firstly to people, place and connectivity, this is about resetting how the communities interact with business and education. So working with VCS, schools, colleges and business to identify and provide equipment to level up the digital divide, understand how employers and employees will work in the short, medium and long term, and understand how communities will need to interact with their local environment and local facilities such as libraries and workspace, capitalise on the county's ambitions for improved access to high quality broadband, and work closely with partners in the public and private sector to shape places so they take account of working locally and ensure the benefits remain in our local places. And then the next thing is skills and employment. And this really is seen as with us driving that stream, but obviously working very closely with the leaders. You've heard Pete's presentation this morning, and as you mentioned, that the GCC had helped fund that work that's been undertaken there. So it's about building that collective, because I mean that's a problem with skills. It's this splat all over the place in many respects. In terms of with the colleges, part of it's with the county, part of it's with the LEP. So it's about how we actually draw that together and move it forward. So it's developing an inclusive employer model led by the county council to promote good workplace practice and work to remove barriers to employment, encourage greater collaboration between partners to fulfil skills needs, work closely with business and investors to drive growth in cyber tech, manufacturing, engineering and construction sectors, and drive the pipeline of county infrastructure projects to develop and execute needs analysis and fulfil gaps in the jobs market. As I said, so it's very much about working with the LEP and building on that work that Pete's highlighted this morning. And then the third aspect and third theme from the county's perspective, which we've got direct responsibility for in terms of driving forward that agenda, is obviously infrastructure, economy and growth, and accelerating infrastructure to promote sustainable development and growth, identify spend in the local economy and develop a social value model that can deliver investment, jobs and opportunities for local business and residents, accelerate delivery of infrastructure projects and bring forward investment for supply chains locally, continue to deliver investment in innovative sustainable transport schemes which promote access, and reframe long-term growth for an infrastructure first approach to long-term sustainable growth. So, things like we've done so far with, securing the funding. When you think about, for example, the J10 and the A417 alone will drive about £900 million worth of spend into the county over the next few years, nearly £1 billion. If we secure Junction 9 on top of that, that's another £300 million worth of spend. So you can see the way we can start to use those both in terms of those schemes, both in terms of making the county more attractive, but also use it to drive skill base and drive opportunities for employment within the community. The action plan, what I didn't want was just a policy document. They're great, but they tend to be read once then sit on the shelf. I felt it to draw, what gets measured gets done, and we really need an action plan to support that. So there's a very short action plan going with the document, and that action plan will be monitored by the transition group who have been responsible for doing this piece of work anyway. And then on a regular basis, probably every couple of months, we'll be looking at that action plan to make sure that what we said and what we put in there for delivery is being achieved. And we're achieving, and we're getting the success we want, and it's being monitored and measured. And what we've done within the within the report, rather than just make it just a bland policy and then an action plan at the end. What we've done is picked out some of those actions and actually put some small case studies into the just small little boxes within the report, just to give the reader a flavour of that. This is not static. It's not. This is what we're going to do. It shows quite clearly we've already got a number of those things underway, and we're making movements in in achieving what we set out within the action plan and within the report. So it just gives you a flavour as you go through about the sorts of things that are already starting to happen. I think I'll leave it there. Lisa, have you got anything you want to add on? Missed out?
I think the only thing I would add is in relation to the nature of the challenge. So at the front end of the document, there's some of the data that really supports the approach. And I think it gives a really good indication of the scale of the challenge that the county is going to be facing. So just a couple of the statistics that have come out from the national data sets. So around 30% of residents have been furloughed at some point in time over the last 9-10 months, which is quite a significant proportion. Appreciating some of those will be in sectors where there was almost an entire shutdown, and that will change in the future, but likely to be an impact in terms of the future opportunities within those particular sectors, which makes the need to understand which growth sectors are in place even more important for the future. I think there was something around 25,000 residents had claimed through the self-employment income support scheme. So very much thinking about your startup businesses and your self-employment base and how that might shift in the future and what kind of support might be required for that. And also a decline in the number of job postings or advertised vacancies within the county has been significantly lower year on year. So just gives an indication of the scale. And I think worth mentioning that the dashboard will continue and need to be continually updated so that the challenges that are being faced as they shift can be picked up and addressed. And I think that's where the action plan over time will require some more detail in terms of the resourcing that's required as we understand a bit more about the magnitude of those challenges. So not to leave you on too negative a point, but I think really, really important to kind of set that as the baseline for what it is that partners will need to collaborate around. Thank you.
And can I just add to that, Lisa, that one thing the Transition Board will be doing, because it's identified within the GJEC report in terms of our collaboration, is the county's role in terms of the evidence space and securing that, and that's what Lisa just alluded to. So the Transition Group will, every time it meets, and already has started to do that, receives a report back from the monitoring, from various monitoring officers and research, to Lisa's research and or from work carried out within the county, to see what the changing position is. So we are aware of that all the time. With the aim, really, what we'll start to do, soon as things become a little bit more stable, then we'll use that to report back through GJEC, so you are aware of what that changing picture is, which is our role as identified within that collaborative report of GJEC about the evidence, providing that evidence base for that analysis.
Terrific. Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Lisa. We've got John Ginty and then Steve Jordan. So, John.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Colin, great to see the report and the action plan. I suppose the thing that struck me reading through some of the detailed actions is sort of no man is an island, because some of the stuff you've got down there for the county council is definitely sort of territory for collaboration with the districts. So you've mentioned in there, for instance, particularly under the people, places and digital theme, you've mentioned in there stuff like, you know, identifying best practice and social value. Some of the district councils, including the city council, have already launched a social value policy. So there's stuff to build on and work together with on the throughout this county plan, I think, is my main comment. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Steve.
Thank you, Chair. I entirely agree with what John just said about social value. It's something, again, that we're keen on. I know we all happy to work together on that. The thing I was going to mention was about we're obviously grappling with the immediate crisis of the pandemic, but then we've also got the overlapping and simultaneous long-term crisis of climate change and how we tackle that. One thing I was just keen to understand is and obviously there's useful references in the report, so which I very much welcome, having a chance to have a look at that, about sustainable transport, which clearly is important. But in terms of that overview, in terms of decisions we take now to deal with the immediate crisis and how they affect the longer term climate change, how are you assessing that as you go decision by decision? Because that isn't entirely clear in the document. I appreciate you can't have everything in the same document necessarily, but how are you judging the short term impact against the long term impact, particularly related to climate change? And also, again, very much welcome retrospectively, as we're feeding back to the previous presentation, the forum, because clearly that's going to be, if that goes ahead, and hopefully it will, that will be very much helping to tackle climate change through all the things that were mentioned through the presentation there. So it's getting that overview, really.
Thanks, Steve. I mean, it's a lot easier said than done, that one. But one of the things, obviously, that we've been hard working on and was part of that presentation yesterday was obviously the multimodal model is going to be really important to be able to judge in the future. Up till now, the county has only ever had a highways model, which is completely car-based, effectively, to judge new developments, new proposals, how even whether you even achieve a modal shift by an initiative you take that you actually introduce. Whereas the multimodal model, when it's up and running, will give us that ability for the first time to be able to see and test in advance how successful innovative type ideas are, to test whether how best to achieve sustainable transport measures to meet a new development or a proposed or planned area of the local plan. I think that's going to be an absolute key facilitator for us moving forward in the future. We have got a number of initiatives that we are trying to move forward. As you know, as I've mentioned and just touched on in response to Doina, obviously the B4603 is really important to me and to the county at the moment to try and find a way to deliver that. We're a few million short, but we're still hoping to look and see for any funding resources to get that as a backbone that we can build the rest of the cycle network off and make sure it's really high quality. I mean, that's one of the things that's being said. Or if you haven't seen it, if you've seen the first section of it that's gone in London Road, completely different to anything we ever delivered before. Sort of 2 metre wide cycle lane through an urban environment, all coloured in green, backed up by a mandatory cycle lane and 18 and loading restrictions on the curb as well to make sure we really reinforce the fact you stay out of that lane if you're a car. And then obviously in the longer term, things like the obviously the drive for broadband is really, really important in that connectivity because it's a good alternative to the car. But then in parallel to that, obviously I think the work we've already started on now and the work is in terms of the mass rapid transit system that I think initially we're looking at from central Gloucester to central Cheltenham, but actually within those proposals we'll go down to Quedgeley and then up to the other side, to the north side of Cheltenham, but with longer term proposals to take it down to Stonehouse and possibly even Stroud and to the north, up as far as Bishop's Cleeve and even Ashchurch. So again, you can see the way we're moving in terms of trying to provide those viable alternatives, which again, that multimodal model will be able to judge very early on to see its potential success.
Thank you, Colin. Steve, so got your hand up. Anything else?
Sorry, that's just a slow response in taking it down again. So thank you for that.
Does anybody else have a comment or a question for Colin or Lisa at this stage? No? Well, thank you very much both for your excellent report. And we'll move straight on, shall we? Time's getting tight, I think. So thank you very much. Yeah, we're now moving on to the first LEP update. And for this, I'll hand over to Dev Chakraborty. Dev.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, conscious of time, and I think my report was pretty self-explanatory, to be honest. It was in two halves. There was an update from the LEP in terms of recovery planning, and we've covered quite a number of those already. Skills portal, the tourism strategy, and I've given a little update about the Think Gloucestershire campaign as well. And then the second half was an update on growth deal funded projects, and there's nothing really there that either should raise an eyebrow or concerns. They're all ticking along quite well. So I think the only request I was going to make, I've touched on it in the report. We are running a business-to-business survey at the moment, asking about working patterns and trying to establish from businesses, where were people working and their employees working prior to COVID? Where are they working now? And where do they think they're going to be working when COVID is a thing of the past? What types of jobs can be worked from home? How they feel productivity has been affected by having employees working from home. So I'm very happy to share that report when we've produced it in probably another couple of weeks' time. The results will be broken down by district as well, so hopefully be useful for everybody. But just an ask for those who are or who use social media particularly, and your comms team, if you can get that message out to get more surveys completed. If we can get it over 1,000 completed, which is our goal, that would be a really good sample size for everybody, particularly as when we're talking about projects like the Forum and Golden Valley. I'm in meetings and people are saying, oh, is there going to be a demand for offices? And to have some concrete data to back it up would be really helpful. So that's my one ask. And then really happy to answer any questions that anybody has on the rest of the report.
Terrific, thank you, Dev. Yeah, very, very good report, comprehensive report as usual. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Dev? No, can't see any hands. Well, Dev's asked us all to take a look at that, the business survey, and see what we can do, so we'll take that away. Thank you very much, Dev. So we'll now move on to a decision that we have to make here. And this is our business rate pool, including SEDIF funding requests, LEP core locality match funding. So we'll hand over to Andrew here now to take us through the report and the two aspects we're asked to consider. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everyone. Looking at the report that we have in front of us, I won't take you through all the sort of grisly details of it because there's a lot in there. It sets out our expected position on the business rate pool for this year, the thinking that the Section 151 officer group have had around the pool for next year, and finally the decision for the committee is whether to agree an allocation of 500,000 for the LEP. In terms of this year, we're still forecasting a pool gain. That's shown in the table just below paragraph 4. We're expecting a gain of about 3.8 million. That is a slight decrease from the last quarter. A number of the districts have had a look at the rates that they're getting and made some slightly more cautious estimates, but it's still a very healthy gain for this year, which will be allocated as set out in the table there, with 774,000 for the SEDIF. The sort of biggest section of the report is on the future of the business rates pool, and we touched upon that at our last meeting. So as Section 151 officers, we asked a company called Pixel, who we've worked with before, to come and do some modelling for us on what the pool might look like next year. And their overall assumption, they looked in detail, was that the pool is viable. They've made some cautious estimates, but they still show a gain for the authorities. Now, they have also put together a reasonable worst case scenario, which is a commonly used phrase at the moment, I think. And under the reasonable worst case scenario, we would be worse off with a pooling arrangement than if we were outside it. And the reason for that is that the pooling arrangement, although normally creating a benefit, closes off a few avenues for safety net grants for us should business rates modelling fall too far. So the sort of central assumption is that we're good, but there is a reasonable worst case scenario where we could be worse off. So what the group has recommended, and we've done, is that an application for pooling has gone in to MHCRG, went in on the 22nd of October, I believe. Now, we do have the right to withdraw that after the local government funding settlement comes in, should it look like the position for Gloucestershire not be advantageous. So we think the settlement will be middle of December at some point. So at that point, we'll take another view as to whether it's worth continuing. I'll just draw attention to a chart that we've got in there. Everyone likes a chart. It makes these things slightly more palatable. I've talked in the past about there's a possibility that government could reset the growth in the pool. And the little bar chart that is at the top of page 86 of our papers today sets out how business rates collected within Gloucestershire is distributed. And it's the little bars at the top which are the key ones. That's all our growth. The big bar at the bottom is the central expected amount from government, and the bit at the top is the growth. Some of it's directly held by the councils, some of it is the pool gain, which we talk about here, and the rest is a levy returned to central government. If the growth is reset, then all of that bar gets returned to central government and we lose our buffer. So if the rates start to fall, it digs into our base rates. Now, my expectation actually is that government won't do that next year. I think we're far too close to the settlement period. There hasn't been any consultation. So I put that there for information rather than clear that will happen now. And just finally, Chair, as you mentioned, the decision for us today is whether we support the request for additional funding for the LEP. Paragraph 25 covers that in summary. We have, for the last few years, funded them £250,000 a year for the cost of their core activities. That allows them to draw down government match funding. The LEP have submitted a full funding request, which has been considered and recommended by the senior officer group, and that can be seen in the appendices to this report. So at that point, Chair, I will pause and ask if there are any questions.
Thank you, Andrew. Does anybody have any questions or comments? John McGinty.
Thanks, Andrew. I'm just trying to understand the reasonable worst case scenario. Is that dependent on whether or not the pool is the business rate scheme is reset, or does the reasonable worst case scenario happen if the rate scheme isn't reset?
Thanks, John. That's a good question. So Pixel don't think growth is going to be reset. So neither of their assumptions include that, and clearly that would change the thinking. The reasonable worst case scenario looks at things like the proportion of people claiming empty property relief, levels of collection falling. It's kind of real economic impact of the pandemic rather than a change in the system itself.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? No, can't see anything. Okay, well, we are
Sorry, Chair,
asked
can I come in?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, I can't seem to find my hand on my digital version. I think the other point I just kind of make is one of the reasons why this year hasn't been as dramatic as we expected is because government have stepped in and given lots of grants to support the empty business rates, or the support to businesses, if you like. And I think we need to think about that for the future, because for me, business rates is not a sustainable tax collection system in the future. And I worry heavily if we start to move towards 100% business rates. So that potentially, not only for district and county council funding, but for the funding that the committee are relying on, calls into question how sustainable that becomes in the future. Now, there's no worry for the immediate future, but I think we've seen some writing on the wall that this isn't a sustainable business funding going forward, and we'll need government intervention to keep it afloat. So I just think that might need to be debated at some point in the future once we know what's coming down the line.
Okay, thank you, Steve. I think that is a very important and very crucial point you make there. We will, I think we should stick that on the agenda at some point. So maybe that goes in the forward plan at some suitable point. But I think we do need to look at what the implications will be in advance. So if nothing else, the politicians can actually do some lobbying as well. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? On that basis, we're asked to approve £500,000 for the LEP to cover a further 2 years to the end of 23. I can't see everybody on my screen, although some of you have come back in. Can I ask any of the voting members who do not want to approve this or are against this to actually make themselves known? Is anybody?
Sorry, just say due to my declaration of interest, I would abstain on that anyway.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Okay, well, if I haven't heard anybody being negative about it, so on that basis, I'll presume or I'll accept that as approval by the committee for the recommendations as laid out in Andrew's report. If anybody's against that, please make yourself known now. Okay, we'll take that as duly accepted. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you
very much.
anything
else we needed to add to this item? No. Okay, terrific. Well, we're on to the final stretch. We've got now the forward plan, and this is on the end of the papers. Has anybody got any comments, questions, additions? John McGinty.
Thanks, Chair. Just following up our earlier session with Pete Carr, I think he said that we would be in a position in the March meeting to take a report on the skills strategy.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I think that was right. Yeah, Laura, have we got that? You noted?
Yeah, I have, yeah. Yeah.
All right, terrific. Anything else then? Okay. Well, on that basis, it's only for me to say thank you very much to everybody who's presented, everybody who's spoken and everybody who's been on the meeting. And our future meetings are now 10th of March next year, 9th of June, 15th of September and 17th of November.
Yeah, it's Mike.
Oh, hi, Mike. Do you want to come in?
Sorry, you passed on a little bit quickly for me there, but just to say that in addition to the March meeting, we are looking to have a meeting at the moment on the 20th of January. Laura may well be able to confirm that. We do have some decision items coming forward for which we require the committee to sit. Not least the funding item that leaders discussed yesterday at the City Region Board. So that will be a new meeting that will go in with some decision items for the 20th of January. And I don't know whether Laura wants to add to that, Chair, but thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. I've emailed everyone to let them know that's taking place.
Yes, so it is in the diaries. I did forget that. So an extra meeting, our next meeting is in January. On that basis, it's only me to say once again, thank you very much, everybody. Look forward to seeing you all in January, although I think I'll probably see most of you again this afternoon shortly. So we're on that basis, goodbye, and we'll see you next time.
Andrew, can you stop the stream now, please?